Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. Today, we're joined by someone who truly needs no introduction, given the high praise he's received from our listeners. Tim Winkler, President and CEO of VIP Tires and Service, is here with us. Tim has been a consistent fan favorite in all of the content he's been a part of with us over the years, and I'm excited to dive into another great conversation with him. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Thanks, Jay. Super happy to be here. And yeah, it's been a while since we did our first one, way back, and been on some panels with you. And obviously, we talk all the time through our other WrenchWay activities. But glad to be doing another podcast here with you.
I listened back to the prior episode that we did, and I believe we were just getting kicked off with the podcast, and my audio was terrible. So I have to apologize for that. Hopefully we're a little bit better off today.
Yeah. Well, you got a new software looking fancy there, so I'm sure it's going to be great.
So give us the latest on VIP Tires and Service. You guys continue to expand, kind of continue to push the limits on what this industry has seen in a really, really good way. So just interested to hear what's going on.
Yeah. We stick to the playbook, but we are opening quite a few new locations. We're averaging 5 or 6 new locations annually. So in October of 2024, we just opened 2 new locations, one acquisition and another one that's a former car dealership where we bought the real estate and turned it into a VIP in Hanover, Massachusetts, and Needham, Massachusetts were those 2. So we're at 73 total locations. We've got another 3 that are confirmed in the pipeline that'll be opening in the next several months. We're getting more active on the acquisition side as we just see so many great operators, single shop operators, and people who've been in the business a long time. And, for one reason or another within their family or within their business, they don't have another clear succession plan or exit plan. And so they love the fact that they can turn the business over to another family business, and that we're going to run it with a lot of the same great family values that they run it with today. So we're growing and we're having a good time. And like we're going to talk about today, we keep sticking to the playbook, which is invest in our people, give them great processes and all kinds of great reasons to love their job. And when they do that, they take great care of customers. And when they take great care of customers, the business flourishes.
Does it ever get overwhelming with going to that many locations? The rapid expansion at times. Do you ever take a step back and say, "Oh my goodness, we're doing a lot here"?
I mean, we are doing a lot, but I would never. I would say no. It never really gets overwhelming, and that's because of the team that we built here. We started this real journey in earnest about 12 years ago, and one of the things that we have really stuck hard to is promoting from within. So all of our district managers, our director of stores, all kinds of people in our support center who are supporting our stores in administrative positions, many of them have been promoted from the stores. And so because of that, we've just built, I believe, such a great team around and supporting the stores that whether it's 20, 50, or 100 stores, if you've got a great support team in place, then it never really gets overwhelming. It gets really, really busy, but it never gets overwhelming.
I think that's a wonderful way to say that. And we were able to see your team up close and personal about a year ago at your annual conference. And I walked away so impressed by how everybody spoke and how polished so many of your team are, and just how much they cared for the brand, right? And when on the flight back, I remember thinking, I just how blown away I was. Just so many good people that were rowing in the same direction, and it just was a reflection of your leadership, and it just one of the most impressive things I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and that obviously doesn't happen overnight. That's been a long journey that we've continued to build, and believe me, we still have a few non-believers out there that we are working on. But one of the things that reminds me of is that you and I talked about when you were there at the conference, and in fact, I just had somebody reach out to me who's in kind of the branding world, who's a customer of ours, a brand new customer of ours, and he kind of had a similar experience walking into one of our shops. And one of the reasons, or I should say, one of the things that we focus on is sort of everybody's got their role, and there's no real hierarchy at VIP. I mean, we all wear the store uniform essentially. I wear it anytime I'm out in the stores or if I'm in meetings with anybody from the stores here at the support center every Tuesday. Everybody here wears the store uniform. When you were at our conference, everybody from our owner, myself, all of our vice presidents, and everybody obviously from every store, we're all wearing the same thing. We're all one team. And I think that spirit and that ownership that we give our store leaders really trickles down. And so it's really a culture that we continue to try to build every year to get everybody thinking about, this mission of earning a customer for life. And some of our people internally have said, we're also earning employees for life. I mean, it's that we've taken our customer mission and kind of turned it internal as well. So it's that whole idea that just when you get everybody who feel like they are listened to and they have a role in the company and it's important, they have a lot of pride.
As part of our past episode and some of the other things that you've joined us for with the roundtables, I think there's a now infamous story about how you took feedback from your team and how brutally candid that feedback was and made adjustments. And I think going back, there are so many people that have reached out to me after listening to that episode that learned, really how to take feedback. And ultimately, it's helped you build a culture. It's helped you build and stoke the fire on this culture that I feel like is what I'm talking about, right? And what you're talking about that is so strong. It's still one of our most popular episodes that we've ever put out. And it, I think, is because you were very upfront and honest. You were not shying away from the fact that there were things that you needed to improve. And you've done a fantastic job at improving all of those things. I mean, taking that feedback, as hard as it can be, and putting together a plan to execute so that you can really reverse course on some of those things. And maybe reverse course isn't the right word, but really turn those perceived weaknesses into strengths. I think you've done it as good as anybody.
Yeah, I think that it boils down, Jay, to the fact that it's all about building relationships. And so when you talk about, kind of distill it down the way you just did, and this journey that we've been on that started with these employee surveys and the meetings with everybody and listening to things that were hard to hear. If you think about it, any relationship that any of us are going to have, if we're going to have a really healthy relationship with someone else or a group of people, we've got to be able to be honest with ourselves. We've got to be able to hear hard truths. We've got to be open to criticism. And we've got to want to always improve. And, I think that's another key to the culture that goes along with that listening culture and the things that we've done as leaders now for 12 years, which is listen, don't judge, don't react, and try to defend, and explain and be transparent. When you're doing those things, if you're a good listener, if you're transparent, if you're open to communication, if you're not perfect and you can get better, that's a pretty good formula for building a relationship with anyone, whether it's a spouse or coworker or friend or whatever. And so I think that that's one of the backbones of this culture. And that annual survey and the annual meetings that we talked about and that kicked off 11 or 12 years ago, and some of the hard truths we had to hear back then, that was kind of our wake up moment to say, okay, what are we going to do here? Are we going to get mad and start firing people for speaking up, or are we going to listen to them and say we can be a lot better? And we decided we could be a lot better. And every year we go into those same surveys and those same meetings with the same mindset. And I get our leadership team together and I remind them, when somebody says, hey, why don't I get paid for doing an inspection on a vehicle? Or why don't we do this? And it's something that's come up, time after time after time. And we kind of know where the conversation's going and what's going to end up happening. But, don't jump to conclusions. Don't get defensive. Be open. Thank people for speaking up. Be a great listener, and let's go through the whole process. And at the end of the day, we're going to all, as a team, identify what the biggest, most impactful things are that we can do to change and be better, and then just go work like heck to change those things and be better next year.
It's easy to say to take the emotion out of it, but I feel like when you're in the moment and you are getting that feedback, emotion's a funny thing, right? It can override a lot of logical thinking. It can override a lot of other parts of your brain in general. Do you have any advice on how to temper your emotions and really use that feedback as constructive?
I guess my advice would be that it takes more than just a single leader uh, with that same mindset and being there with each other. Because I think about when we started these, it was really three of us: our owner, myself, and Gary, who you guys have spoken with a lot. Gary's our vice president and has 35 plus years running all kinds of auto shops around the country. The three of us were really there to kind of hold each other accountable, because you're right, the emotions get, somebody stands up and starts pointing fingers and is getting emotional about a point they want to make. And human nature is you want to stand up and say, yeah, but what about this and what about that? You're right, and your emotions take over. And we're not perfect at it by any means. There have been plenty of times, I'm sure, when we've gotten too defensive over the years and we've come across as, boy, those guys don't listen. We're definitely not perfect at this by any means. But every year, I think we get a little bit better at it. And every year and now we've got a team of 5 or 6 of us. We've got our HR manager who travels with us, our safety manager, our director of stores. So we've got 5 or 6 of us that are in all these meetings every year. And so we're there to kind of balance each other. And every once in a while, if one of us kind of starts to go down that road, another one will speak up and say, hey, thanks for speaking up. And I took that note, and I'll make sure that we get back to you on that, to kind of bring the temperature down a little bit.
I think that's the power in strong leadership too, and your network with the three of you starting off with those conversations. And when you're having those initial conversations, I have to imagine that if one of you started to go down that road where it's starting to become more finger pointing than kind of taking accountability, that can quickly kind of spread to the other two, right? And I think that at its core is why you guys have been so successful with this, is because you don't allow for that to happen. You hold each other accountable. You really, it's part of your DNA now at this point to be able to listen. But without that initial conversation or those initial talks between the three of you and being on the same page, it would be really, really hard to go and execute anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? That kind of reminds me of probably the first time that happened was year one, 2014, when one of our technicians up in one of our northern Maine stores, John Quirk, our owner, was challenging him about why he doesn't have certifications. And finally, this technician, kind of burst out, well, what the hell's in it for me? And John was like, wanted to jump down the guy's neck, like, and I turned to John and go, he's right, John, we got to think about this. Like this has got to be a whole two-way street going here. And, and there were many after that. One time somebody stood up right in front of Gary and said, you screwed me. Gary's like, me? I screwed you? You screwed me. And so he had some story where his paycheck got shorted and he thought it was because of some decision Gary made. And, I had to go, hey, come on, we'll dig into the details. If we owe you some money, we'll pay you money. And there have been times I'm sure that I've lost, my cool, and John or Gary have had to step in and say, hey, let's calm down, and we're here to listen and take a lot of notes, and let's go through the process. Much of the friction and much of that, the first few years, we were just trying to figure this out, and how are we going to do this and everything. So, these later years, and quite frankly, these years, a lot of our people who've been with us a long time, we get to them and they're like, come on, Tim, I got nothing else for you. I mean, I've given you every idea I've got, I mean, I love it here. What do you want me to say, So that's not everybody. And every year we come away with pages and pages of things they want improved. And sometimes now it gets into things like shop equipment and, the condition of my store and some of the more tangible things that we just need to go spend more money on. It's not as much the emotional and the lack of communication and feeling left out, that kind of stuff. I think we've made a lot of progress on. And so now we're down to things that we can kind of really sink our teeth into. And sometimes they just come down to how much money we can spend every year within the budget.
And sometimes it feels like it's now down to fine tuning, right? Because you've got the culture in check, you've done the listening and you continue to do the listening. And I think over time, if people see that what they've told you is something that is actually then turned into action, it's perceived differently. So that each year you go into those feedback meetings, there might be even a little bit more respect with it. There might be a little bit more merit because they've seen things get fixed based off of their feedback. And I have to imagine it's getting maybe a little bit easier and maybe it's a little bit more fine tuning than wholesale changes than it had been in the past.
No, you're exactly right. And in fact, you reminded me of something that's a really important part of this process. And when we build the agenda for these meetings that we have every February, when we go around and meet with every employee, which we're now up to about 750 total employees, when we build the agenda for these meetings and the talking points, there's a section on page 1 that we put on there every year that's called Actions Taken as a Result of Last Year's Feedback. And we bulletize all the items, all the investments we made, any changes we made. And every year it's 10 or 12 things, some of them small, some of them pretty big. But that's what we call the closed loop feedback, right? So you get the feed, you listen, you take notes, you get all the feedback. Obviously, you can't do everything, but everybody needs to hear about what we actually did. And we need to be able to tie that back to the fact that they spoke up and that we are going to listen. And then we're going to look across the company and see how many different people at how many meetings did this come up, and whether that's going to make the list of things we can do this next year. And so we call that out specifically every year. These are the actions we took because you spoke up last year. So please, speak up again this year. And to your point, some of the stuff becomes a lot more fine tuning now versus major, boy, you need to fix communication in this company. It sucks. I mean, that was, one of the big year 1 things. And, now we're into a lot more finer details.
I'd love to hear that. And I think it's human nature to want to get that feedback loop completed, right? If I'm there to give you feedback and I don't see anything out of it, which to be honest with you is really common in our industry. We hear it from technicians all the time that, you know, they have these complaints, they have these things. We just saw it in our voice of technician survey where it in some ways there's some repetitive nature in the feedback that they're giving. And I get where technicians can get exhausted with trying to give feedback but not feeling like anything's changing as a result of that feedback. And so the fact that you're completing that loop, I feel like is so important in really it does create that buy-in, and I think it does create that loyalty behind the brand because maybe if a technician has been at a different shop at some point over the course of their career and they come to VIP and they see that, hey, things are done differently here. This is they actually listen to what I'm trying to say. It gives them a better feeling about the industry. It gives them a better feeling about the shop that they're working in, the people that they're working alongside. And I think as a whole just drives more happiness.
You're right. And, I got to give a shout out to our owner on that point, John Quirk, who, we're in a year and a half or so, you're going to see us celebrate 100 years in business. His grandfather started in the tire business in Watertown, Massachusetts in 1926. So in 2026, we're going to be celebrating 100 years. And John has the one who, he owns 100% of VIP today. And, he gives us the freedom to run the company and to do the right thing for the long-term health of the company, right? Even though we have monthly budgets, and I've got quarterly goals, and I sit in front of a board meeting every quarter to report on our results and to talk about our plans. Uh, I'm not forced, and our company's not forced to make short-term decisions to try to hit some sort of artificial financial objective. John is in this for the long haul, and it allows us to do the right thing, and that shows. That shows in how we do it. That shows in how we communicate. It shows in our employees knowing that we've always got their back. Um, and so, because we have this long term vision of what we're always becoming, people look at us today and think, oh my gosh, you guys got it all figured out. No, we don't. We got all kinds of areas we need to get better in, right? Our vision of where we are 5 years from now is a way better place than we are today, right? But we're not forced to do things in the short term. And it allows someone like myself who's in a leadership position. I have all the authority I need to make these changes and to meet with my CFO and our leadership team. But I don't have these constraints I have to work within, and I'm not trying to report up and satisfy some level of reporting accountability that ties my hands or in some way forces me to do certain things or not do certain things. And it allows our leadership team to just have that freedom. And when you have that freedom and the owner is going to support you, then it makes listening a lot easier, because you listen, you take notes, and you say, okay, let's go talk about what we want to do. And he's a part of that process. And so I've got to give a shout out to him, because if it weren't for having an owner like him, the process would probably have a little more friction in it.
What a great point. And if you feel like you're handcuffed going into those conversations as a senior leader, it's not comfortable. And I've talked with others that have been in that position to where they don't have the autonomy to be able to do some things that they feel strongly about. And they're really when I say handcuffed, it really handcuffs their ability to do anything to make an impact. And one thing I'll say about John, in my brief interactions with him, he couldn't be a nicer person and just a more down to earth person that I feel like anybody could relate to, right? It could be that technician that just started off, is just out of school, and I just get the sense that he's got this kind of calming presence that when he shows up, it's not, oh my goodness, there's the owner. It's hey John, how's your day going? It's a little different.
Yeah. Well, and his story is super brief. There's other podcasts out there where he tells his full story, but out of college, he went into computer sales in the 80s and was doing an awesome job and building a big career in Manhattan. And his dad called him one day and said, I need to do something with the business. Are you interested? And John said, in a few years, I'd be interested. And John says this was a Thursday, and his dad said, well, I need to know Monday. So in 3 days later, John resigned from a big job in Manhattan and took over a single tire shop in Watertown, Massachusetts, which was struggling at the time. So he took over one store in 1985 and built it to two stores, had a big commercial division and a retail division. And then in 2001, went big and made the big acquisition of VIP, which had 42 stores or so at the time. But John spent from 1985 to 2000, 15 years, John ran his own tire shop. So he's lived it. He's lived, what it takes every day to wake up and come in and take care of customers and take care of employees and manage technicians and parts vendors and all the stuff that our guys have and girls have to do every day. So he's walked a mile in their shoes, and the guy now owns 73 stores and growing, and all kinds of real estate and everything. But you're right, he's the same down to earth guy that he was 20 years ago. And you have a great conversation with him. And we always say, when people talk about all this private equity money in the industry and everything, and about John, and we say, just go spend 10 minutes with the guy, and you'll walk away. You can't find anybody more passionate about this business. And he loves the business, and so he's out there today, meeting with real estate or acquisition targets, because we've still got our foot on the gas pedal, trying to find more growth opportunities as we move south into southern New England.
And it's not fabricated at all. I think it's very authentic. I think that resonates with a lot of people, such as myself. When you talk to him, you can tell that passion is there. And I'm sure doing it for 15 years and running your own, you can't help but be passionate about it, right? And to see the growth has been such a cool piece. Even in our relationship, you guys have grown a lot, even since we began working together. So it's such a cool thing, and I think you can see, you know, in every business book you ever read, it talks about how kind of the owner's personality can kind of it reflects on everybody in the company, and that couldn't be a higher compliment to him, just because again, being there, seeing it firsthand and seeing how passionate everybody is, it does stem from that, and it's very, very cool to see.
Yeah. Amen. Amen.
All right, so let's oh, sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I just said I'm blessed.
Yes, absolutely. Technicians, have you checked out WrenchWay yet? WrenchWay is a free online community for automotive and diesel professionals. Whether you're looking for a job or not, WrenchWay makes it easy to explore new opportunities, stay up to date on what's going on in the automotive and diesel communities in your area, and helps improve and promote the technician profession. Check out all of the job details you care about before you apply or interview with WrenchWay Top Shops. Details like photos of the shop and answers to the questions you actually care about instead of the same old copy and paste job description you see everywhere else. Open to new job opportunities but don't want to apply yet? Create an anonymous reverse job post and let shops reach out to you and see what's going on with the industry in your area through WrenchWay's Shop Talk. Join the WrenchWay online community for free by visiting wrenchway.com or by downloading the WrenchWay mobile app. Link is in the show notes. All right. So, in past content, we've talked about the feedback and how critical that is to getting. I want to spend some time today talking about the execution side of it and really being able to take what you've learned from your conversations with your team to really make it better, make the business better, make people happier. And one of those things that I think is really impressive to me is your approach on the ASE certifications, and similar to what you had talked about with John's conversation with a technician and what's in it for me, you guys were able to really combat that by taking a different approach to those ASE certifications, right?
Yeah, it started with ASE certifications, and I'll just say that it's expanded into all kinds of training that we, invest in today. But it started off with ASE certifications. We had this vision to become this professional certified service provider, and we had all these technicians back 12, 13 years ago, and very, very few had any ASE certifications. And so every meeting we had that year, we would challenge people, why aren't you taking tests? And we were like everybody else at the time. We would reimburse you if you went and took the test and passed it. But if you didn't pass it, right, no reimbursement. And for especially some of these younger kids in the business, they don't have $100 to risk on whether they can pass an ASE exam or not. And so we came back from that first round of meetings back in 2014, and we found somebody in the office here who was willing to step up and say, I'll help all the employees manage their ASE pages and get them scheduled. And we decided we'll pay up front. We'll buy all the study guides. We'll give everybody every study guide they need. We create a career path so that wherever you are in the organization, you know exactly what that next certification is that you should be working on, so that you can work your way up the career ladder. So we documented all that. So it's all very clearly laid out. We use that now, obviously, as a great recruiting tool, because we can sit in front of someone who maybe feels like they're at an organization, then they're, it's fine. They get paid good money and they do good work, but they don't see where are they going in a year or 2, 3 years from now. And we can lay all that out in front of them. And we have made it an absolute zero cost scenario for the employee. And people will ask us, well, how many times can someone fail it and you keep paying for it? We haven't hit that limit yet. I mean, for some of our guys, to get master technician and they got to pass automatic transmission exam, that's a pretty tough one for a lot of them. And I know a couple of them personally, it took them many times on that test to get it. But they were so proud when they finally achieve it. And so even if we have to pay for it 7 or 8 times, whatever, We just have said, we're going to make investing in yourself. You invest the time, we'll take care of the money. I guess that's a real short way to say it, is we'll pay for the certifications. We've partnered with Garage Gurus on all kinds of hands-on training, mobile that comes up to our facilities every year. We do the daily training with today's class. We do all kinds of evening training through other partners with O'Reilly and Napa and everybody. So we're all about training and certification and helping people get ahead. And in our industry, that's kind of how you measure that, and that's how people go and learn. And so we took that complaint, if you will, year one, and we've turned it into what I think is a huge strategic advantage.
And think of how proud that technician that failed it multiple times is after they finally get through that barrier. And I think it moves it from a point of embarrassment to a point of pride when they finally get there. And I feel like others are genuinely happy for somebody when they're working at something and they finally break through. And that scenario is so powerful because had you not reimbursed, the likelihood that that person goes through all of the hurdles to get to pass that test are practically zero, right? That there's probably not a chance that they're actually going to see that through. And the fact that VIP enabled them to be able to do that is pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, and one quick point, we actually don't reimburse. We pay up front. So nobody even has to put
Even
a penny
better.
down, number one, for anything. Number two is what's kind of a funny byproduct of all this is now I think our uniform supplier tells us we have the most complicated program to manage when it comes to store uniforms because we love patches and we love for all of our people to be able to show those off. So whether somebody gets G1 and they have the G1 patch, or they've become the certified technician, then they go to become master. We're big in the Valvoline program, so we have people who have become Valvoline certified. We have a patch for that. We have stores that are AAA approved. We have a patch for that. We've created our own in-house patches for state inspection licenses because up in our states, most of our states still have an annual state safety vehicle inspection for vehicles. And our technicians who get certified and have a license to be a licensed vehicle inspector, they get a patch for that. So, our shirts sometimes get overloaded with all these patches, and our uniform company struggles to keep up with keeping everybody's shirts right with all their patches. But that's all part of the brand image too. It's, if we're going to make these investments and we're helping people build these careers, you start thinking about, well, what does this look like from the consumer side, from the customer side? How does this translate? Well, it translates in that we're going to show people off. All of our people behind the counter and in the shop, they all wear the same shirt. It's the same uniform. They all have their patches on. We have windows in every waiting area out into every shop. We want to show off our people, and that's all part of the brand. And when you can build a business that provides great service like this, and consumers can see that in how they interact and how the company presents itself through its people, it also allows us to charge a little bit more. 15 years ago, VIP was known as a discount retailer with the lowest prices in town, and here we are 15 years later, and we kind of are on the other end of the spectrum now from a pricing standpoint. But that's also because we're on the other end of the spectrum from a compensation standpoint. You have the right talent, you invest in your people, you pay them really, really well, and you're able to charge more. And once again, the financial results of the business show that for us at least, that's a winning strategy.
I mean, it's just easier to run a business with good people. And it goes without saying, but also it's one of those things that if you've ever been in a business that maybe doesn't have the strongest people from either a talent or attitude standpoint, it can be painstaking to put out those fires each and every day. But if you're hiring really, really good people, a lot of those fires don't exist.
Yeah. And the other thing that we've identified as we continue to grow, which is a sign to me of the strength of the culture, is, hiring's not a perfect science, right? That, we all know that. And so we still, as we grow and as we're moving into these new markets, we've made some mistakes and we've brought some people in that weren't a good fit, and I can remember one specific leader that we brought in for a new store. And luckily we kind of brought in a number two who, ended up becoming the number one in that store because we brought somebody in and they were not a great fit. And it became pretty obvious. It only took about 3 months. And as we started to really dial in on what the kind of behaviors were going on, that person decided that VIP wasn't a good fit for them, And so when you have a strong culture, people tend to sort of, sort themselves out, if you will. And that's another kind of byproduct of having built it over time. But things that we're still learning as we grow too is, we're never going to get perfect at it, but every time you make a mistake, you're like, okay, maybe here were some red flags that we should have identified, and next time we'll learn from that.
I think that's one of the greatest parts about a great culture is that if you come in and you don't fit that culture, it's pretty abundantly clear almost immediately, right? And I think without that strong culture, you can let anybody walk in the door. But if you've got that strong, tight knit culture, it is really hard to get one by you, right? Because it's going
Yeah.
to be clear really, really fast.
Yeah, no, and it just comes down to personal relationships, and obviously I can't personally know 750 employees, but I know all 73 of our managers pretty darn well, and I know every one of them, and I know that each one of them we train and coach them in our leadership courses to make sure that they're building really good relationships with all their teams. Our district managers have all been promoted from within, so they all, have all these great relationships. And so the more relationship focus you have within the organization and the more layers and levels of relationships that exist, the stronger a culture is. Nobody feels like they're on an island or in a vacuum. They always feel like they're a part of the team and we've got their back, and then they'll have our back because they'll put forth that discretionary effort, if you will, that, they don't have to do, but they do because they want to go the extra mile.
The next thing I want to move on to is how you do that across that many locations, right? The communication, the consistency, and really being able to have that VIP stamp on every single store. And it can be a real challenge. It's a challenge in one location, let alone uh, as many as you guys have. How do you drive that consistency in brand across all of those stores?
Yeah, that's probably the biggest challenge, no question, and it's the thing that we're not the best at, and that we still have huge opportunity. But I think any organization that operates as many stores as we do, or obviously others who have many more than us, that's probably the biggest challenge is consistency across locations. Some of the things that we do to really do the best we can. First of all, we have formal processes. And that's one of the things that came out of another thing that came out of the first year of our meetings with our employees was a technician stood up in one of the markets and said, why don't we have one way to take care of a customer? Why don't we have a VIP way? When I fill in other stores, when people have vacations and stuff, I go to one store and, oh, well, we do it a different way here. And I go here, oh, well, this is our process. So I'm working at 3 different area stores. Everyone has a different process. Why isn't there one VIP process? Can't we just come up with the best process and make everybody do it that way? So we did that. We created what we internally call the VIP 5 for 5 customer engagement process. And we've built training videos on it. We've got a whole training regiment, documentation around it. And we're not perfect at it by any means. We got a lot of stores that could be a lot better at it, but we build the foundation, we build the process, we say, this is how we want to do things. And whether it's the customer engagement process or our safety program or leadership, all kinds of different areas, you build a process and you say, and then you communicate it. This is how we want to get things done. And usually when we build a process, we take that feedback from our own team members to say, well, what is the best way to take care of a customer? What should step 1, 2, 3, 4 be? Let's get your feedback. Let's everybody buy into this. So we're, putting a process out there that everybody has had a voice in. And then from a consistency standpoint, just operating in general, Gary, who I mentioned earlier, Gary has been doing this a long time. We have a whole a weekly communication regiment that we follow. Every Monday afternoon, we're reviewing the prior week and the month to date operational points. But more than that, we're reviewing, a lot of our KPIs. We're reviewing what are kind of some of the things that are going on that we need to get better at. And then after we do that with all the district managers, every district manager then has a district level call with all his or her managers where they cover a lot of the same things at a district level. And then our store managers have store meetings twice a month where they have the whole team stay after work. They buy them pizza and they take at least an hour to talk over some of these communication points. And most importantly, talk about, hey, how's it going? What can we do to get better? And let's dig into something that we can all tomorrow, try to focus on to improve the business. And so we have this kind of cascading communication that I think is, at least for us, it's our best effort to try to ensure that consistency across so many locations.
Any best practices in terms of taking a process that you've laid out and getting your team to execute? And one scenario that I'll lay out for you is you hire that new service advisor and you've got processes for that service advisor, and that service advisor could have read through the processes and really have a firm understanding of them. But it's different when that customer calls up, right? And you've got that customer and they start asking questions about, hey, I'm looking into some tires, or I'm looking at, I'm just trying to get my car in for repair. And I've seen it a lot of times over the years where the wheels just fall off, right? Because maybe they're not as prepared as they thought they were. Do you have any best practices for ways to take that process and make sure that it's implemented?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to mind. First of all, we try our best to have newer employees, especially less experienced employees like you're describing there. They need to be comfortable saying, I'm not the right person, but I will get you to the right person. And so, and that always doesn't always happen, but we try to preach that, and especially on something really important like my car's making a noise, or I think I need a timing belt, or tires is a big thing because you got to really know what you're talking about if you're going to sell tires, because people typically are calling 3 or 4 places and it's competitive. So you got to know what you're doing. So we try to, for that newer person who's less experienced, we try to have some guardrails. There are certain calls you can answer and certain situations you can take care of when somebody walks in the store. If you get outside, if you get over your skis, to use a northern term, if you get over your skis, find somebody else to help, and or tell the customer, hey, I'll be right back with you when I get somebody. Another thing we do is we do monthly coaching. Every one of our managers, we have a whole database that our technology team built. And so every month, our managers get a prompt with kind of every employee's performance on KPIs, their sales, if they're technicians, their productivity, all the metrics that you would want to measure of an employee's performance. Every manager gets that. And then every manager has a monthly coaching format that they fill out where we're talking about, here's the areas that you're doing really well. Here's an area I want to focus an action plan on so that we can get better next month. And then as part of that monthly meeting, they also talk about career goals. We want every manager to be frequently talking to our employees about, what are you looking for out of your career? And when you get an employee thinking about that, so many of these young kids will say, I don't know, right? They haven't decided yet, or nobody's ever really forced them to make that decision. If you keep asking, they'll finally say, you know what? Hey, Justin over there seems like he's got a pretty good life. Maybe I'd like to become a master technician someday. All right, we've got a formula to help you do that. But what that means right now is that I got to get you really good at some of these foundational things. And so you use that long-term vision of what somebody wants to become to help them become great at what they do today. So those monthly meetings that the managers have with their employees, I think, is probably what I would say is one of the most impactful ways to sort of help people really get good at what they do and try to keep us from presenting ourselves in a poor manner to a customer.
And that drives communication, right? I think in a lot of ways, that's one of the most common complaints we hear in our industry, that I think is a driving factor as to why some technicians feel like they're just a number and they don't feel appreciated. And even if that manager appreciates them and respects them, if they don't communicate it, that silence speaks volumes, right? And if you don't have the proper communication in place, a lot of what you work really, really hard at starts to fall apart.
Absolutely. No, communication is the key. And year one, that was another big complaint at VIP was communication sucked, and we had to get a lot better at it. And we're always going to be working at it. We're never going to be perfect at it, but I think we do a lot better today than we did for sure back then. And hopefully, we'll be better tomorrow than we are today.
Now, you talked about the fact that we're to the point to where we're starting to fine tune as much as making big changes. Do you maybe have some examples of areas that your team has given you feedback on that you've been able to change, right? And maybe more in those small tweaking fashions rather than the big ones that we've talked about in the past. Do you have some examples of things that you've been able to change based on feedback?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very very long list, and I'll by no means do it justice in a minute or two. But we've improved benefits, we've improved bonus and compensation plans, we've improved just this past year. Our managers really told us that work hours. It's a grind running one of our shops, and we're open 7 days a week. Our managers only work 5 days a week, but we're open 7 days a week. And so it can be a grind because even on your days off, you're getting texts or calls or checking payroll or what have you. So we actually shortened our store hours, and we shortened the documented work expectations for our managers this year. We close 30 minutes earlier now, Monday through Friday, and 2 hours earlier on Saturday than we used to, because we wanted to give especially our managers, but really all of our team members, some extra time with their family, which they kept saying was really important to them. So that was a huge win for our people. And so far, 2 months into that change, we started in September. We haven't seen any real material impact to our revenue. So it was a nice way to make some changes around the edges that they were telling us they would really appreciate. That helped they see it as an investment in their time with their family. So that was the most recent one. A year ago, the big change was giving our entry level technicians tool carts loaded with all the tools they need to start as a tire and lube technician in this industry, because so many people come in and they don't have the tools, and we don't want them to go run up a big debt on a tool truck yet. Hopefully never, but too often we had seen that where these kids get into debt on a tool truck. And so we spend about $2,500 on a tool cart loaded, and we give it to every new entry level technician now. And we tell them, if you stay with VIP for 12 months, it's yours. If you leave, and if this doesn't work out for you, then it stays with us, and we'll make sure it's all in great shape, and we'll give it to the next person coming in. But that has dramatically reduced the number of entry level technicians who were leaving the company within our first 12 months, because not only are they tangibly seeing the benefit of owning this toolbox that they've now worked out of for 12 months, but they see it as that emotional support, and they see it as an investment that the company's making in their future. And so that was one the last 2 years. Those were two of kind of the headline changes that we made that our people said. And that tool cart program, Jay, I bet you 5 years in a row that came up, and they kept saying, you guys need to do this. You guys need to do this. And it was expensive. It cost us probably, across 73 locations, I bet you we've spent over $400,000 on tool carts. And so, but it's the right thing to do. And we got to a point financially in the company where that was the next most important thing that we can invest in for our people. And so that was the investment last year. Last year we also we've on a multi-year campaign now to reduce the cost of healthcare benefits. That's something that every year
right
comes
now.
up. Yeah, premiums are expensive. Healthcare, there's no getting around it. Healthcare is expensive, and it's not great oftentimes. But we're doing our best to slide that needle on the employer versus the employee share of the expenses on premiums. We've gone from what used to be less than 50% employer to now anywhere from 65 to 80% employer paid on the premiums, which is making it more and more affordable for our people to have that health insurance. And so that's become one of our big things every year that we continue. We're hoping every year to keep moving that needle a little bit.
I feel like you're as you're listening, you're just removing barriers from great people coming to join your organization, right? Because if you're focused on that entry level tech and you know that cost, even for me coming up in the industry, that was always one of the things that really confused me, because here comes probably your lowest paid person that is going to make the most significant upfront investment to do their job. And for you to get them the tools they need to be able to do their job, I think is just an incredible thing. And I would encourage others in the industry that are listening to this to really take that seriously, because if you do have that financial burden, and especially as a young person, you talked about it with the ASE certifications. I was one of those young techs at one point where I wasn't taking the test because even if it was reimbursed, it was out of my pocket. And if you're struggling to pay for gas that week, your money is going to go to the gas and the food and the housing first, right? Because you don't have a choice. And so being able to take some of that burden off of them up front, and taking the burden off of them, the financial burden of having to pay for something up front and then get reimbursed. I'll never forget my first, I think it was my first business trip, my first true business trip, going, and they're like, well, just put it on your credit card. And I was like, I don't have a credit card. Yeah, I don't even know how I'm going to get down there, you know? So I think when you take a step back and you look at yourself as a 20-year-old, and you actually think through some of the complications that you had, and how, in my case anyway, I was terrified to tell anybody that, right? Like, I didn't want to tell anybody that I didn't have the financial means to be able to pay for the conference up front and then get reimbursed. It's the same thing with the ASC certifications, right? If you're almost putting some level of shame on somebody for something that's completely out of their control. They're just getting started off with their life, and here we are putting some really negative financial implications on them up front.
Yeah. No, and it also kind of rolls into the bigger issue that I know you're super passionate about, and that Wrenchway is so big in supporting, is this whole idea that we've got to help young people grow into great automotive technicians. We need a lot more of them. And so when you look at the things we've put in place now, and the other thing I always tell people, I meet with I'm in dealer groups with other dealers and stuff, and many of them look at what we do and they try to go from 0 to 100 all at once. And I say, look, we've been doing this for 12 years, and every year it's a one step forward. Don't try to do everything at once. But what we have in place today, though, is a pretty good formula. You bring somebody in, even if they're inexperienced, and you give them the tools, you put them through a training program, and you get them certified. We do TIA certification, ALI lift, certification. We do all the basic things. We train them on all the equipment they need to be trained on. You put them next to somebody experienced that they can learn from every day, hopefully in a good culture with a good leader and a team that, helps each other. If you get all those things right, and then you say, okay, now here's some study guides in your free time at night, instead of playing Xbox every night, pick up an ASC study guide and let's start learning G1 or A5, and let's start getting you some better, more formal knowledge. And then I'll show you some stuff hands-on in the shop. And you get someone thinking around, all right, I could have taken some other job for $20 an hour and, flipping burgers or, doing some other retail job. But now here I am in this job where I have the training I need. I'm working next to someone who's invested in helping me get better. I can go get my own certifications. Those go with me whether I stay with VIP or not. So they're investing in me, in my own career, even if I decide to leave someday. And you help someone sort of see the vision of, a career in this industry can be very fruitful. And we have so many stories of people who at a young age came in at the entry level, and now today they're married, kids, new big house, new truck. They've built such a great life, and it's all their hard work has done it. But part of our role is that we've created an environment that allows them to then see that vision and go achieve that vision.
And help them see their vision too, right? I think all of us were probably guilty of that when we were younger, of maybe not having full clarity on what it was that we were striving for. But when you can pair the vision of the company with what their personal vision is, and really help hold them accountable to it, and then accountability is not a bad word then, right? If you're holding them
Right.
accountable to what their goals and aspirations are, uh, it's not just you hammering down because you're not performing at the company's expectation. It's that, hey, listen, we know what your potential is, and you're not living up to your potential right now. We want you to do better. We want you to create a better life for yourself, and here's the path to do it. But it also takes some effort from your side too, right? You have to be able to come to the table with that effort and the attitude, and really the right approach. And the stronger you build your culture and the stronger you've built that team, the less of a hassle that is, or the less of a burden that is, because you want to get up there with everybody else, right? I have to imagine that that creates some of that buzz and some of that just excitement to want to go attack it, rather than having this burden placed on you that you don't want.
Absolutely. No. And it, it comes down to always having that relationship comes first, right? I mean, people need to know that you care and that you genuinely want to help them and help them get ahead. But, I can't tell you how many times, with one of our managers or even other employees who I'm close with and have a relationship with, and maybe to your point, they're not performing at their best. And I can tell by the results and by the things that I'm hearing or seeing in the store. And I say, hey, I love you, man, right? But I know you're better than this, and I want to see you be great, and we've got all the tools in front of you to help you be great. And oftentimes, so many people don't realize, they don't see in themselves what their true potential is. And I think that's probably a universal truth, that everybody has some level of greatness that they're capable of, but it really takes somebody else outside of them to challenge them. And you said hold them accountable, and really show them that they can be great and that they can do great things. And I think that's a universal truth. And it's really probably one of the hardest things in leadership to do, is to really tap into everybody's potential and help them to see that in themselves. But when you do it, it's magic.
I think I know you're a big sports fan, big football fan, and as am I. And I think there's so many principles that you we can learn from sports in general, right? And how they do that same thing, where they're pulling the potential out of somebody, and the best just know how to do it, right? They are really good at getting the best out of people. And I've read a lot of John Wooden's books, right? And just hearing what he did and his principles, and similar to everything that you're saying, stuck to his playbook, and really worked on the execution of the basics, and just so much of just truly getting that potential out of somebody. And nobody does it better than you guys. I mean, you guys are phenomenal all around as an organization. Uh, and I after other content we've done, I've had people reach out and say, "Hey, can I talk to Tim?" And I've made some introductions to you,
Yeah.
and this is new car dealerships, independent shop. It doesn't matter. You've taken the call and helped people out, but just everything you talk about. The reason I brought up the sports analogy is just because I do see so many parallels to how you approach your business and your people, and your ability to get the best out of everybody is incredible.
Yeah, I probably could have been a football coach had I chosen a different path in college and become a math teacher. But instead of a math
I
teacher and
couldn't
a
see
football,
that.
instead of a math teacher and a football coach, here I am running tire stores and loving every minute of it. And I appreciate the kind words. Like I said, we're every day we try to be better, and we know we still got areas we've got to get better at. And but it's pretty fun to kind of be where we are today, and especially to spend time with our people and be able to see them smiling and loving working for VIP. That's what I tell everybody is, my job as the CEO is to wake up every day and try to help everybody love their job at VIP. And if they do that, if they come in with a smile and enjoy what they do, our customers are going to be able to tell that from the moment they walk in the door, and the business results are going to be good. And ours have been better than good. And so I'm grateful, and I'm grateful for all the members of our team who help make that happen every day.
Well, thank you once again. Every time I have you on to something, I learn something, and today was no exception. I learned a lot throughout our conversation, and I appreciate you taking some time to talk with me here again today.
Hey, I appreciate what you guys do at WrenchWay. You're one of our favorite partners, and hopefully we can get you out to the conference again.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Jay.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.